everyone, welcome back to Physical Science Online. Whoop whoop. It's Ms. Vukovic here for the Avon High School Physical Science team, and this week we are talking about classifying matter. For this week, we want you to be able to identify 4 different classifications of matter. We want you to be able to do that in simple terms, just give us definitions. And then we also want you to be able to recognize those different types of matter in everyday life. And we'll go over one example together. All right. As a request from some of your classmates, this week is a lot shorter and has way less questions. So hopefully you guys will have a little breather for this week. So let's get started. All right. So when we look at this slide, we'll notice that it's a flowchart for classifying matter. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. As a class, we've covered half of this flowchart, everything that's in the blue. We've already talked about what pure substances are, and we've talked about elements, and we just finished 2 weeks of talking about compounds. Something that we're going to learn are what mixtures are. Mixtures are relatively easy to identify, so we'll just have to recognize the difference between homogeneous and heterogeneous mixtures. If you get stuck on any of the questions during this week's activity, always pull up this flowchart and it should help you work through the problems to find your answers. So our first section is something that we've already covered when we classify matter. And these are types of matter that are pure substances. On the atomic level, there is either just an individual atom or 2 atoms bonded together, which could be covalent or ionic. Looking at number 1 of pure substances, our simplest classification of matter is an element. Each element contains 1 type of atom. Those atoms are found on the periodic table, and when you see an example, you'll see it written as an element symbol. When 2 or more elements combine through a chemical bond, we end up with our second category of pure substances, and that is a compound. Compounds contain 2 or more types of atoms. They can be ionic or covalent, and when you find examples, you'll see them written as chemical formulas. In the last 2 weeks, if you've been struggling with writing chemical formulas, I don't want you to continue to worry about that. Instead, I want you to be able to recognize that a chemical formula falls into the category of a compound. So, for example, if you see carbon dioxide, its chemical formula is CO2, and you should be able to recognize that this chemical formula is representative of a compound. Our second category of matter is mixtures. Mixtures are 2 or more types of substances that are in the same container, space, or volume. These 2 or more types of substances are not bonded together. So instead of our pure substances where there's this force of a bond holding everything together, mixtures are simply existing in the same space. Our 2 types of mixtures are homogeneous and heterogeneous. Homogeneous mixtures are by far the hardest to identify because you cannot see the parts. Heterogeneous mixtures are a lot easier to identify because you can see all the parts that are existing in the same space. All right, so for this week, I thought something that could be cool for us to do is look at real-world examples of classifying matter. For this, I chose the example of pollutants. So we all know that there's pollution in the world, but we want to be able to identify how those pollutants are classified as matter. All right, so to provide some background information before you do this week's activity, I pulled up 3 examples for pollution. If you take a look at the center picture, you'll notice that it represents a cityscape with the ocean, the beach, and a couple different factories. There's a nuclear power facility in the center. In everyday life, there's going to be pollution. We can have pollution as air pollution, land pollution, water pollution. Air pollution often looks like clouds of smoke that are being released from factories, cars, things like that. Although we see air pollution as just clouds, what makes up those clouds are very specific compounds that are polluting our environment. So although we see a cloud, what really makes up those clouds are these compounds of SO2, O3, CO2. So if we talk about air pollution is one really great example of compounds that are polluting our earth. And so these examples of air pollution classify as a compound or pure substance type of matter. There are also other types of pollution, which we all know about. For example, if you look at the ocean, you'll see that there's litter or trash in the ocean. When we look at that, we should be able to recognize that we can see all the different parts. We see the water, we see the water bottles, the plastic bags. And if we consider the ocean as one space, as one volume, this type of pollution would end up being a mixture, where the trash is contributing to making a heterogeneous mixture in the ocean where there should not be trash. So this week, what you guys are going to do is read an article about pollution, and then you're going to complete a Google form on Classroom. I know that the article might be a little above some of our reading levels, so it's okay to skim through and pick out important parts. Specifically, try to identify those 3 different types of pollution: land, water, and air. And try to find one example of each. Once you find that example of each of the types of pollution, you want to figure out what classification of matter could you give that pollution. Is it air pollution, which is just a compound? Or is it more like water pollution where trash is in the ocean and that's a mixture? All right, so I hope this week finds you well. I hope your families are staying healthy, everyone's staying happy, and finding some bit of calm throughout this chaos. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out through email, and make sure you guys are checking in on each other, because I know that being home and being isolated can be really lonely. So make sure you check in with some of your friends or classmates that you normally see throughout the day, and I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great week, and let me know if you have any questions.